32 teams, 64 matches, 29 days. The most eagerly awaited tournament in the world is upon us. And even as we look forward to all the action on the field, this Football World Cup is being talked about more for host Qatar's controversial preparations ahead of the tournament and their strict laws, especially against women and the LGBTQ community. Reports suggest more than 6,500 migrant workers from India, Pakistan, Nepal and Bangladesh have died since Qatar won the right to host the World Cup. The families of the deceased have not been compensated despite losing their main breadwinner. Even former president of FIFA, Sepp Blatter, has finally acknowledged that this was indeed a huge mistake to award the World Cup hosting rights to Qatar. Blatter had reacted right after FIFA ambassador and former Qatari football player Khalid Salman made derogatory remarks on homosexuality, calling it a mental health issue. With less than a week to go for the opening ceremony, this is a huge concern now about how the players, officials and fans will be treated given the medieval rules in Qatar. If you are wondering how bad and discriminatory can they be, let us give you an example. Qatar laws require women to have a male guardian's permission to do most things in life. Like if she wants to marry despite her age or former marital status, she needs to get permission from her male guardian. Once married, she needs her husband's permission to work or travel. She can be punished if she refuses to do so. In fact, she can be punished if she refuses to have sex with her husband. Meanwhile, men can marry up to 4 women without taking permission from their current wife or wives. That's not all. Women cannot be primary guardians to their own children. They have no authority to make independent decisions for their kids. Small things like what school they should go to or where can they travel, their finances, and even their medical treatment, mothers cannot decide that. If a child has no male relative to act as guardian, the government takes up the role. Now, while these rules may not have a direct impact on the fans, it shows how the government violates women's rights and how the Qatari laws are stacked up against women. What can be problematic for female fans is the laws around sexual intercourse. Whenever there is a big sporting event like the World Cup, there have been instances of sexual violence and harassment in and outside the stadiums. It will be extremely difficult for women to report acts of sexual violence in Qatar because the laws do not support them from the word go. According to a report in The Athletic, several human rights groups have expressed concerns that female football fans could be prosecuted if they report sexual assault while in Qatar. It is also said that in many cases, the victim of sexual assault is accused of extramarital sex instead of receiving physical or emotional support. She could be imprisoned for reporting it or flogged if she happens to be a Muslim. This brings us to what should female football fans be wary of while traveling to Qatar. According to the guidelines issued by the UK government, no drugs are allowed in Qatar. No alcohol can be consumed in public for anybody. Drinking in a public place could result in a prison sentence for up to 6 months. Dress modestly when you are in public. Women must cover their shoulders and avoid wearing short skirts. Both men and women are advised not to wear shorts or sleeveless tops when going to government buildings. Any intimacy in public between men and women can lead to arrest. The rule also applies to teenagers. Living together whilst unmarried is prohibited in Qatar, and sex outside of marriage is illegal, regardless of whether this is same-sex couples or opposite-sex couples. Homosexual behavior, that's illegal in Qatar as well. While the Qatar government has repeatedly said that everyone is welcome to their country, there is one incident that gives a clear idea of how quickly things can go wrong in that country. In 2020, more than a dozen women were forcibly taken off the plane at gunpoint in Doha, and they were subjected to unnecessary intimate examination without their consent, without any explanation, after a baby was found in a rubbish bin. 5 Australian women are now suing the Qatar Airways and the government-owned Qatar Civil Aviation Authority for unlawful physical contact. they felt the incident has severely impacted their mental health. The concept of sports washing, which means taking the sports route to improve one's image, that has been used since the time of Hitler. The Nazi Germany had hosted the 1936 Olympics in Berlin for that propaganda purpose. Governments with tarnished images, they have tried to take sports route for improving their reputation. Now, in case of Qatar, the criticism of its government has only grown louder as the FIFA World Cup approaches, and it has divided the footballing world. So while former England great David Beckham agreed to be the Qatar World Cup ambassador, US men's team are showing their support for the LGBTQ community by wearing a rainbow-themed logo at their training facility in Qatar. The big question now is, with the global spotlight on this tiny sheikhdom and many teams with different political ideologies, can Qatar keep itself out of controversies during the World Cup?